Hello everyone, Cyndire here with another update on Let's Make a Game Astral Collision. Let's move this microphone a little over. So the first thing I want to note is that I've started doing live streams of playtests on Fridays at noon Pacific Daylight Time or whatever it ends up being. We'll see how long those continue. I think that's something that I kind of want to keep doing while I'm working on these things though, as long as there's something to kind of playtest anyway, because other game projects would have periods where there's not much to playtest because there's a lot of development work to get up to that point. But RPG Maker kind of jumps a lot of that. So those are on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Cyndire. And there should be a link somewhere floating around on like the header or whatever. But those are not... There's a couple of notes. First of all, these do lag behind those in terms of like when they occur. So these are going to occur later because I record these a little bit in advance. So that way I can make sure stuff comes out on time and all of that sort of stuff. And to give me some flexibility in that. They also are not going to be as thorough covering stuff as these are. And all of that. But you do get asked questions and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. And the VODs of those will be going up on the channel, so you can always find those. Okay, so let's begin addressing stuff. Now, I think I discussed making all of the NPC sprites last time. If not, just to quickly kind of go over this, because I don't remember if I'd completely finished this or not. But I made the standard NPCs for all of the area. So before we just had Kendra, right? We had these guys. You've seen these all over the place because these are my like generic Kendra NPCs. But I've added the other ones as well. So Cyndire, Divertier, and of course these all have the face things as well. Elsana, Evanshire, which I think I talked about the costumes being really similar and stuff like that. Just as kind of a review. Falsaw, Galden, there's Kendra again, Kaldisha, Kushigai, Mivina, Ron Piety, Sacritan, Tulador, and Yorgot Est. Now, as I've been kind of going through things, so let's figure out where I want to start. There's a lot of like little things that I'll get to that I've been kind of working on, or you can also see over here, Mountain Root's been starting to get fleshed out, and I'll go over that in a bit too. But just to kind of talk a little bit high level first, one of the things that I also have done is I have sorted all of the enemy sprites. Now that's a process. Oh yeah, by the way, the Devil Hen became the Plains Scorpion, and I decided Scorpions should drop crystal shards. But if we just go over to one of these, I have now labeled these things. So you can see these are boss. I'm going to use these for bosses somewhere because I didn't know where else to stick them. But we have these guys are labeled as being from Cyndire. And these guys are labeled as being from Divertier. And so on and so forth. So I've gone through all of the enemy sprites that come with RPG Maker MV. And I've assigned them locations. So you can see I moved the cockatrice sprite to Elsana. That's where I decided it should go. Yeah. And then Evanshire has a bunch of stuff, has a few things. Falsaw has stuff. Galden has stuff. Kendra has a lot of different things going on in it. Kaldisha has stuff. I'm not going to linger here too much. You can always pause the video if you want to like look at it a little bit more slowly. Kushigai, Mivina. Mivina has a lot of the like angel type enemies. This is the one enemy specific to Ron Piety because kind of the idea is there's a sect that's gone haywire. Sacritan has a group of enemies. Then we have the teams from Kendra. So these are various adventuring teams. And then we have some enemies from Tulador. A strategically placed hare. Yorgot Est has a few enemies. I'm not sure on some of these if I want to try to color them because everybody from Yorgot Est is dark-skinned. These are clearly not, so I'm kind of wondering if I want to see if I can kind of recolor them somehow to give them darker skin. But anyway, so during that whole process, and there's some places that don't specifically have a whole lot of enemies, but all of the areas should be at least somewhat represented. Ron Piety has a lot of attackers from Mavina. Mavina gets around a lot. So Mavina right here attacks here and here. So you're going to see them show up in these two places. I think they probably try to attack here as well, but find a little bit more resistance. Because these guys are way hardier. You don't really see any of them go this way. You might see some in some of the southern reaches here as well. But, and I want to think about enemy spread in other ways as well. But that whole process of sorting through where enemies go and all of that led to me realizing I needed to spend some time figuring out how are enemies working in various areas. So, like, some areas it's very clear what the enemies are. Kendra has this whole monsters theme. Like, it's got this really clear, what are the enemies, what's going on with them, what's the story. Cyndire, likewise, like, I've got a really clear sense of what are enemies about in this area. And what to kind of cover what that is, there's a lot of sort of pseudo Doom inspiration with maybe crossed a little bit with the whole Balrog thing. But they have an underground society because the surface of their world looked like this, and nobody wants to live on this. This whole lava place down here, you can kind of see. And so they live underground, where it's ironically less lava-y, relatively speaking. And as they kind of expanded to new areas from their original sort of starting location, it opened up a lot of monsters and stuff like that. So they have this very clear thing, and I want to have like a lot of Doom references with what's going on there. So if you look at some of the enemies that I chose to belong to Cyndire, you see we have the Dark Lord and the Dark Lord Final, this demon imp, and then there's like this couple of things this way that remind me vaguely of like things that might belong to Doom, and kind of have the combination of like demons and possessed technology kind of stuff that you got going on with like the Revenants and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of the direction that I'm going with Cyndire. These are going to be nasty. And so it's like that has a very clear picture of what it's about, right? That gives me a very clear picture. Kendra, likewise, has a very clear picture. This has a general clear picture of like, and Yorgot asked over here, of wandering enemies that, like the Behemoth and stuff, the big sandy monster, with like cacti on it. Like, that's clearly an excellent enemy for here, and bandits make perfect sense for this sort of place. The nature spirits makes really good sense for here, for example. There's like werewolves and stuff like that make great sense for Sacritan down here. So I've got some of these areas which have very clear images of enemies. Also sort of the more angelic enemies make a lot of sense here. I think I talked about the nature spirits here. But then we run what's going on in Galden, what's going on in Elsana, what's going on in Kushigai to some extent, although that also had some clear inspirations. Tulador, what's happening here. Evanshire, what's happening here, and what's happening over here in Falsaw. So all of these started becoming like big question marks, because, I mean, this is an RPG. A core mechanic of it is fighting random encounters, right? That's just how it works. So I really came to the realization that I need to have some sort of answer to this fundamental question of what things are you fighting as the player? Like, what is your point of combatness? What are you combating? Why? What's going on here? And so that's a process that I've started working through. I need to figure out what's going on over here in Evanshire. I think there's something going on in these woods, and that's the main thing. I don't know if there's any like what would be going on in some of these other woods. Like, there's a lot of territory here that needs something going on. I don't 100% know what all of that is yet, but I need to figure it out. And like, this whole process has led me to working on this section, the location blurbs. Now, over here's the spreadsheet that we all know and love with a bunch of random stuff in it, including things like the skill sets, which are bright and glaring. And I decided that there's going to be one of each from each region. I don't remember if I mentioned that in the previous one or not. I feel like I might have, but it's hard to keep track of everything sometimes. So I've started working on what is the enemy lore for specific areas. This is something, like I said, that I've started working on. Some of them have some very clear stuff, like various monsters, mostly agitated monsters and bandits, nature spirits who know their time is done. Like, I got some clear stuff. The Doom inspired, so a mixture of demons and experiments gone corrupted. I'll get into some of these other things in a bit. But Falsaw, I'm like, oh, what's going on here? So, because Falsaw, for those who may not remember or did not watch the Religion and Games Crossed Astral Collision series where I made this whole document, Falsaw, where Devin McElroy is, so they had a pursuit of justice that turned to vengeance in bloody wars. Eventually, they learn what justice is, and peace grows. They elevate the court system to a high position, but go fairly mellow and secular as well. Get caught up in a cycle of vengeance and warfare, and as a result, religious considerations got pushed to the side. So that's kind of like the basic pattern of what goes on in Falsaw. So leading up to the Astral Collision, if I find it in the list here, these are people who, in many regards, worship justice. I'd say they have a very egalitarian society, but perhaps a bit of a nervous one, in so much as there's a bit of a culture of reporting on the crimes of your neighbors. They have a very developed legal system and a highly revered system of courts. In the past, there were many wars for vengeance dressed up as wars for justice, because this is the thing that happens, right? Is justice gets perverted into revenge, into vengeance. And that's what happened here in Falsaw. They eventually rejected those ways when Devon was around, but those wars did propel a lot of technological advancement. I think they also have a well-developed and regarded police force, but honestly probably doesn't have that much to do. And so they have a lot of laws, but they're not necessarily oppressive laws. People aren't hovering over you to mess up, but if they notice it will get reported. Generally, lesser crimes don't receive too harsh of a punishment, but if repeat offenses, so if you're a repeat offender, it will escalate quickly. And so their research into the other worlds shows them places that they believe need their brand of culture/technology, which leads them to participate in the Astral Collision. They do prepare militarily with the understanding that there are nasty things out there, but they believe they can improve the other worlds. They have some of the mentality that everywhere would be better with their cultural ideals/values. In the wake of the Astral Collision, they're heavily militarized as they feel the freedoms of their lands are under assault. These are the events Devon foresaw, and a lot of players' goals is de-escalation. They need to come to regard the creator. So I've got like stuff going on here that I was kind of thinking through in that whole series. And so like I have stuff that's going on here of once the Astral Collision happens, what are the events that immediately get set into motion? And I'm needing to kind of flesh things out. One of the things that's very clear is that world building is like other forms of art. You have to lay some broad strokes, and then you fill in details, and then you fill in details, and then you fill in details. And you refine things, and you adjust things as stuff that you had previously thought doesn't work is like now working or not working, and like it's just a whole process of refining a painting. So if you've ever watched like a sped up time lapse of a painting or whatever, where it's like, oh, here's this painting 20 times faster, so you can see the 60 hours in like 6 minutes, sort of thing. Those will show you like starting off with a sketch and then blocking in the colors and then kind of moving things around and adjusting things to kind of get stuff to fit and all sorts of stuff. There's a whole process to it. And world building is a lot like that. You lay down some broad strokes of what you think things are going to be, and then as you kind of work on stuff, fill in details, stuff takes better shape, begins to form up. But you also run into things that are real important, like this is an RPG and I need enemies. So Falsaw has this idea of it was kind of a peaceful place, but they've built their military back up in preparation for the Astral Collision. And so what I've decided for a lot of the random enemies here is they'd built up their military. After the Astral Collision, a branch of that military splintered off, believing that the government had misled them into a disastrous situation, and they're looking to exact justice, which is really revenge, against the government as a result, so sort of a paramilitary rogue organization. For a little bit of further like unpacking, I've been watching a Metal Gear Solid 5 Let's Play lately, and I'm taking some inspiration from that in terms of like, this is an organization with a lot of strong military tech that is basically, they think the government did them wrong, and they are trying to do something about it. And there's perhaps, you can argue whether or not you think that's justified, but it gives me some enemies of like, here is some mech type things, and here's some like soldiers, and another like robots. So they've got a combination of like mechanized military units. I'm not 100% sure if this belongs here or not, but I think it's fine. It has a very Egyptian theme feel to it with this thing, doesn't it? I don't know. And then we've got a couple of soldiers and some robot type things, right? So this is like what I'm doing, because again, I need to figure out what is the story of the enemies here. What is the story of the things you're fighting? So like, what's the story of this and this and this and this that you're going to be fighting in Evanshire? I don't know yet. I'm going to figure it out. And that's part of the process here. But like sorting the enemies made me realize I have these details that I need to fill in. And so I've begun the process of trying to figure out what that is. I've got ideas for Falsaw. I need to get some ideas in for the rest of these places and like what's going on, what's caused this to happen, and all of that. Now, if we go back over to the map, one of the things that you'll see is we have Cyndire over here. Let's not have this so zoomed out. I've been in the process of trying to figure out what does this place look like. So I used this to rough out some dimensions for Mountain Route, which is sort of the main area of Cyndire that you're going to like in terms of civilization and things like that. The basic structure that I'm going for here is you have Mountain Route here, and then you have other places that used to be cities that kind of go off into tunnels and things like that. I'm not quite sure how many there's going to be yet, but there's going to be some number of those that are now battlefronts where they are fighting against these demonic forces. And they really want to keep them from being able to take over the rail lines and make their way back to Mountain Route, obviously. But they have a bunch of battlefronts going on with those. So that's kind of the structure. And in this process, I have, because this subway belongs to them, and part of the reason why I'm going to work on Cyndire next, even though they're not chronologically the next place that you're supposed to visit, is that I got this whole subway thing set up. I drew these sprites. I'm really happy with them. I guess if I go over here, you can see them right here. I heavily borrowed from, no, it's SF Vehicles, isn't it? Where did they stick those? I don't know. Should be around here somewhere. Oh, no, it's just like, yeah, dirt. It's right here. I heavily borrowed some elements from these buses. So you can kind of see some elements from the buses kind of show up there. The doors I just straight up took. I took colors from this as well, just to give me something to work with. I consider myself an okay pixel artist when it comes to smaller size stuff. But getting too big kind of overwhelms me. But neither here nor there. So I've gotten this train now has proper graphics for it. But I got this set up, and this moved over because I realized having it right here is really annoying when you're trying to walk over to this. I think I might have showed the functionality for this off already, but if not, I will probably show it here. But I've gotten like most of these subway tickets. I don't know the name of this island yet, but I've gotten most of these subway tickets implemented and functional, except Mountain Route takes you, doesn't take you where it's supposed to yet because I didn't have it, and so I was kind of wanting to make it. So that's kind of like the genesis of going this direction, as opposed to somewhere like, I don't know, Sacriton, which would make more sense because Sacriton is right down here. It's on your way to... This is the area you're supposed to go next, narratively speaking. And I did the playtest on Friday of, okay, what is it like to get to the boat that you acquire here in... I forget the name. Sandy March, I think, which is an in-joke reference that I don't expect anybody to get to Wooden Potatoes, or Elder Scrolls Arena Let's Play that he's been doing, where he kept calling Shady March Sandy March or something like that. But anyway, your goal is to get to rank 2 in the Adventurers Guild so you can get the boat from there, so that way you can then take the boat out, sail it through this area over to here, where sort of the major next set of plot things happening occurs. And so that's kind of been so I playtested that, but like this is on the way. You don't really want to stop here, but technically you can. I don't know. This is one of those things where it's like this map doesn't make sense progression wise in retrospect, but I kind of like the wildness of it. It's kind of like how in Dark Souls 1 you can just walk over to the graveyard and down into the catacombs. Maybe you're not entirely supposed to go there, but if you can persevere through it, you can technically. Or you can wander down the New Londo ruins and get wrecked by ghosts. I mean, that game lets you go in the wrong direction, but that's cool too. Like, it gives you a certain amount of freedom. And maybe it would be better to better direct the player to where it is they're supposed to go. But, it's decisions were made. And maybe there are other things that I can do to kind of help inform better. So anyway, this whole thing to make that wandering story, I don't know, go somewhere. This is a logical place for you to go. There's not a whole lot for me to add here, except for some really high level dangerous enemies. And I kind of need to figure out what high level they're supposed to be as well, where I need to target them for. But this is kind of the next major plot area. So, and I do want to tweak some of the encounter rates in this area, but that's a later Cyndire problem. And like I need to make more cities. You can see I've been slowly fleshing stuff out. A lot of these don't. I'll go over them in a bit, but I want to talk about Cyndire first. Okay, so let's do that. So yeah, I've been kind of figuring out what does this look like, and part of that process has been figuring out what types of locations do I actually, practically speaking, want here. Because so the process was I made this kind of like shape, and this was just filled in with a bunch of these generic city sprites. And then I was looking at that, I'm like, I don't know what buildings I need to actually put in here. Like, what sort of buildings do I put in here? So I started just doing some thinking. I initially recorded them over here, which is what this is about. This is just general notes. And then I put them over here where they could be a little bit more organized and where I could, I don't know, stick this on my second monitor where OBS is hanging out right now recording. So that way I could actually reference it in a way that wasn't obnoxious to do while in the middle of working on things, because trying to look up stuff in that, yeah, anyway. So these are just the different things that I thought through of things that I want. A government headquarters, a military headquarters. Military is really important there because remember, it's protecting them from demons and other random junk that are associated with that. And it's converted from an old rail line hub. Now, the idea here is that they have a very robust subway system. We have it as kind of the fast travel mechanism to get around the world. I don't think you're going to get any sort of flying thing. Like, typically in RPGs, you get an airship at some point. I don't think I'm going to give that to you. You're going to get a regular ship, but I don't think you're actually going to get an airship. I thought about having some helicopter stuff. And the problem with that is landing on towns and stuff can be really awkward. And I just want to be able to have more control about where some of that stuff, like your angles of approach to places. Like, if I go back to the world, though, I don't want you to just fly the helicopter over here and land in the middle. Like, this isn't going to do anything, and I don't want to have to try to figure out what that even means. So because I don't have a good way of saying you can't land here as far as I'm aware, plus it doesn't interact nicely with this floating place here. But because I don't really have a way of kind of controlling that, in any sort of meaningful sense, as far as I'm aware, I'm hesitant to actually give you a helicopter. I've put a couple of helipads on the map, like right here, where I was thinking that I would do that. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep those on the map or do something else with them. I may make an alternative fast travel mechanism where you can just go to those and then it like loads you in the helicopter, flies you over to one of the other helipads. This one? Is that? I think those might be the only two. Yeah, I might just put in a thing where you can fast travel from helipad to helipad. So yeah, there's just those two. So I might do something like that, but I don't think I'm actually going to give you an airship equivalent. So you're going to want to make use of this whole subway station access system, where you go in here and you buy a ticket and you take it somewhere. And that's the only way to get to Mountain Route anyway. But Mountain Route has this very robust subway system. They also have like subways within Mountain Route itself. Like this is a whole line thing where you can interact with the different lines. I do need to get some sort of sign here, because like this is the red line, this is the green line, and I don't want a colorblind person to look at this and be like, which one's the red line? Right? And like this red and orange can be kind of similar as well. So I want some sort of additional signage. This is inadequate, but I need to figure out what that's going to actually look like. This does technically indicate like yellow line, orange line, red line, and hopefully like something like that can help too. But anyway, that's to take you around the city of Mountain Route. Now, originally there was going to be a larger subway hub that would take you from like Mountain Route to the other sort of like city areas, but those are all now battlefronts. So that old rail hub is now the military headquarters. Yes, I'm building up lore because that's important. You layer on the lore and figure out what's going on. So that's converted from the old rail hub. And then I wanted a central subway area for like traveling within Mountain Route. That's this right here. Like if we just go over here, you can see this is the government building. This is the military HQ. This is where the subway hub is. This is just a nice park in the middle, because they want some sort of something. So this is a nice park in the middle of everything. You can't actually get to these areas in game just yet. This subway station access thing is supposed to go through the military HQ in some way, shape, or form, and I haven't put all that together yet, so you can't actually get here. I could just spawn myself here, but you can't just get there. Food production, they're going to need some sort of farming system, some sort of schools. I'm not 100% sure. Like K through 12 is the system that we use in the US. I'm toying around with trying to think through other structures. I like the idea of potentially some sort of like daycare adjacent system, like daycare school that's like for kids, like toddlers through 10 years old approximately, or like 10 years old equivalent, whatever that looks like. I mean, these species don't have to, because this is non-human, right? It doesn't have to work the same way as humans do in terms of development rate. But then having kind of more of a public school option that's for like 11 up, like 11 to 18 equivalent. And then they have the Golda University and the Military Academy, which are the two sort of major post this. Again, I'm using framework from our society, and it's probably not going to be exactly that. But Golda University is kind of the major institute of general learning and understanding and knowledge, and then the Military Academy is a really important place where people go. Manufacturing, including refining, storage, basically warehouses, residential areas, shopping areas, recreation parks, theme parks, whatever, sort of like active play spaces and things like that. TV, video production areas, research labs, hospitals. This is probably singular. They probably only have the one hospital. It's a city that has, limited space. They may not have like multiple hospitals. They might have like a military hospital and a civilian hospital. Police, I don't know if they need a fire department or not, but maybe. General maintenance crews, construction, it might be part of the general maintenance, and then like some sort of mining operation for the acquisition of raw materials. Haven't entirely like this is a pretty broad swath of things. I think I can't say like this is 100% as thorough as it needs to be, but this is pretty thorough. in terms of like the ideas of what things are needed for this place. And I also like their military is really important. So that means that I spent some time figuring out the structure of their military. I'm going to need to make specific sprite sheets for their military. So I actually spent some time on Wikipedia looking at military ranks and thinking a little bit about how Star Trek does stuff, but only a little bit. Just we've been watching through Deep Space Nine lately. My family has. We've watched through the original series and the Next Gen, and then DS9 now. A little bit of Voyager when we've been getting them from the library, but that's neither here nor there. So I have two categories: officers and enlisted. These are from highest rank to lowest rank. So we have the commander, which oversees the entire military. Major generals, which are of equivalent rank to a general, but rather, so generals just oversee a very specific conflict zone. So there's going to be a general in each of those like individual cities, right? So I was mentioning this earlier. There's various former cities that have fallen and are now battlegrounds, right? They are an area of conflict against these sort of like demonic entities. And so the generals oversee these various conflict zones. Major generals function as being over these areas that of operations. So they're kind of like heads of departments. We have colonels, which oversee troops and reports to generals. Majors, which are majors of a field. So they usually directly serve a colonel. So we have major of operations, oversees troop operations and movements. Major of logistics, overviews supply chains. Major of medicine, overviews medical care for troops. Major of technology, special role outside of the standard military procedure, typically in charge of military research of some kind. So these guys are going to work directly for the major general of technology, most likely, and working on developing like weapons tech and armaments and arms and all that sort of stuff. Major of communications is going to work with communications technologies, and major of information. They're not intelligence in this. They're another militar. Good job, self. But they'd likely be called major of intelligence in other military. But these individuals in charge of reconnaissance operations. So we have these fields, and so major generals are globally in charge of this specific thing. So like the major general of operations is going to basically be a high-level official working for the commander specifically that's overseeing the broad operations of everything. So they're going to be kind of in charge of like what are the troops doing? Where are they going? What are they doing? What's kind of like generally going on? The major general of logistics is managing the entire supply chain of all of the various branches, like segments of the military operation. The major general of medicine is, and these do not necessarily have a direct, like I'm using real world things, but I'm not necessarily putting things in the same order that things would be. I'm calling these major generals because they are functioning like majors in a general sense, like, at a higher level sense. So the major general of information is in charge of like curating all of their information, their bestiary and all that sort of stuff, and what's going on in each area in terms of enemy movements and stuff like that. And like these are obviously all very interconnected. And then we have captains, which are in charge of a specific group or area. Lieutenants, which function similar to chief, is typically in charge of various teams, may also serve as an adjunct to a captain, major, etc. Lieutenants kind of like and then we have cadet, which is a trainee. They have a 2-year. They spend 2 years at the academy, and then they have at least a year of active duty, and then at that point they can be promoted to a lieutenant by any officer that's at least captain rank with whom they have served. So they cannot be promoted by another lieutenant to lieutenant. And so like lieutenant's the like proper lowest ranking officer, if that makes sense. So they'll kind of like fill whatever general roles, assistant roles, and stuff like that are needed, things like that. Then we have enlisted. So enlisted are just people who have joined the military and then they kind of can get promoted up, but they've not gone through academy training for being an officer. They just get standard combat trainings type stuff. So their expertise is not quite the same, but they can spend time there and get more responsibilities commensurate to their experience. So we have just the private, which is the lowest rank of enlisted soldier, the sergeant, which is medium rank, and they're usually in charge of 3 to 6 privates and called a team. So privates will report to a sergeant. Typically, they have their sergeant that they report to. And then sergeants will usually work with chiefs or lieutenants. And chiefs is the highest enlisted rank, and they can have various responsibilities, usually in charge of several teams. So this is kind of like the overall structure of the military, and I'm going to need to make a bunch of sprites for character sheets for each of these different categories and figure out some uniform stuff and all sorts of things that I'm going to have to add. One of the things that has happened in Kendra specifically, so let's jump back to here. I don't know, here, for example, is there's a bunch of sprites here that I'm using that are some of the inbuilt sprite sheets that came with RPG Maker. So, for example, we've got these actor sheets that I'm using for a number of these NPCs. Like, I'm using this one for the salvager, and this one for the smith, and this one for the magic smith. This one is a merchant sort of interactable, and this is an information interactable. And these are like random hero dudes. This is potentially a sprite that I might use in Mavina, but not outside of there because the wings. And I've also used a couple of these. I'll use other of them in other places. Like this I used for, is it Kazdan? Whatever, the healer guy in Kendra. I'm using this for the king and queen, and I'll probably use some of these other royalty. I'm using these for the guards. So these things I have been using for some of these more specific roles rather than generic citizen roles, where these are generic citizen roles, right? Like your standard merchants and stuff like that, innkeeps and all that sort of stuff. So Cyndire, I have made all of these like generic NPC sprites, but I need to make specific ones for the military, for example, specific ones for like police and other things, and government officials potentially, for very specific individuals and things like that. So it's been this process where it's like, okay, I've made these generic things, but I was leaning for Kendra on a lot of these other things for filling in some of these roles that are more specific, where I want a distinct sprite for them. And I'm going to have to make those for places like Cyndire. So Cyndire is going to have several sheets for military individuals. That's just how that's going to be. And so that's been a big process, and it's taken quite a while to talk about it. But that's kind of an important area. Here's Sandy March, by the way. Nothing's happened here since the last time I showed it, except I fixed the bug where this guy was not actually charging you any gold. He just required you to have 500 gold on hand, but he didn't actually subtract it from you. So I discovered that particular bug. I should also mention, while it's on my mind, I've set up a common event for the vending machines. Right now, they just sell you bottles of water. I'm going to make additional drinks that this will vend that are going to function. You can't cook with them. They're not an ingredient, but they function similarly in that they are... so if we go over to states and go down to my food states, like cherries, for example, increase your agility by 5% for 100 steps, right? And they are classified as food. As opposed to like a meal, which lasts 1,000 steps, also classified as food. You can only have one food at a time, and I need to make sure some of those systems are working properly. But this will grant and this will be applied to your entire party. So if you eat an ingredient type thing, it applies just to that character and does not last as long. If you eat a meal, it applies to your entire party and lasts much longer. And has some effects. So I'm planning on making some additional beverage type things for the vending machine using the where's water? Using this same graphic that are like also 100 steps and food, but they're not an ingredient. You can't cook with them. They're just a snack, I guess. I'm not quite sure what I'll categorize them as. But I want to add several things for the vending machines that you can purchase. I'm already thinking of like an energy drink and trying to think through, okay, well, what would that do and stuff like that. Potentially some fruit juices that, like apple juice. Oh, it just applies the apple effect to you, because that amuses me. Grape juice would apply the grape effect. I'm not sure. I guess I could do like cherry juice and and orange juice. But so I'll probably add these fruit juices. And maybe I'll make it like a fruit punch that has like a little bit of all of them, like 2% to all of your elemental stats instead of 5% to 1, stuff like that. So I've been kind of in the process of thinking through some of that stuff, but not making it just yet. I've also been fleshing out some of these other areas. So Isle Watch is that's using that as a folder. This is Isle Watch. It watches this isle. Names have to come from somewhere. So this is like a work in progress, but it has an inn and these houses and a guild house. So here's our lovely inn. These houses don't have anything in them yet. And then the guild house, which just has the requisite NPCs. So I'm in the process of kind of fleshing some of these things out. These actually have a mechanic where you can't go inside at night. So if it's nighttime, so you switch nighttime, then you get a sound effect and it says that it's locked. Yeah, that's what's going on there. Weston is not really a thing yet. I've laid some foundations. It turns out it just takes a while to lay in maps, and I'm not always wanting to map. I'm wanting to do other stuff too. So it's like bits and bobs and pieces here and there. Forest hut. Yeah, this is where this guy right here, Kasdan the healer. I can see down here in the lower right corner. I think that covers a bunch of these things. Now, let's talk some about skills. Maybe show off a little bit in game. Maybe a little bit. While I'm thinking about it, something I keep needing to fix is this adventurer's kit shouldn't have a scope. So I'm going to give it no scope. It's very accurate. 360 no scope. Okay, skills. So I added some stuff. I don't even know where I'm going with all of this stuff. Other things just popped up that directed me elsewhere. So Sycamore right here is this town where there's a bunch of farms and stuff. And there's this here that I'm going to be changing because reasons I'll get to in a moment. But I added this NPC right here who you can see is a crafter. There's some dialogue there about being a local artist and using goo and fruit and wood. And so he will make you these focuses. So this one was already around. This gives you a bunch of earth affinity. This gives you water affinity. Cherries are associated with wind. This gives you wind affinity. Oranges are associated with fire. This gives you fire affinity. Also, I've been needing more clubs. So there's now an applewood club, a cherrywood club, a grapevine club, and an orangewood club. And they give you plus 5% to the relevant stat that fruit is associated with. Speaking of clubs, by the way, while my brain is everywhere, I buffed both pipes and clubs. Pipes I just gave a much higher minimum to. The idea is that these are strong early and maybe kind of fall off a bit as you go on. Clubs, I gave them an increase to the lower end and scale with your level, and then just an increase on the upper end plus the scale with level thing as well. This used to be like 20 and 30 without the level thing. So hopefully this makes clubs a bit better because they were a little underwhelming. Another thing actually from the playtest that I was looking at, I know this is all disjointed. As I stumble across stuff, it makes me think about things. Is I tried a thing here where I would where I'd print out on the crafting display and the shop display the old damage range for the weapon on the character, and then the new one, and that just took up way too much space. So I'm just gonna stick with the adjustment. I prefer the more information that this one has, but my UI space is extremely limited. So anyway, these also all have like apple smash, cherry smash, like they have a smash skill, which is how we got into this whole tangent in the first place. I came over here and I saw these skills. These are all functionally very similar. They cost 22 TP, give you 10 TP, have the standard normal state, and are an attack that deals damage of the relevant element that relies on your stat in that element plus 15. So, for example, Apple Smash deals 15 plus your Earth stat, Earth damage. That's kind of like orange is fire, grape is water, and cherry is wind. But these are kind of unique skills that are attached to those that you can get by crafting them at this dude. I will show you that dude later. So, other skills. Are there other things here that have been added? I added Frost Strike. So, playtesting has demonstrated that Frost is an incredibly valuable damage type. So, if I go back here, where is Spell Swords Training? So, this is the thing that you get right at the beginning of the game. If you explore enough, this gives you Frost Strike and Thunder Strike. So it gives you. My brain is like, yay! Let's do kind of a callback to Pokemon, and this is your good old Ice Beam Thunderbolt, your Bolt Beam combo. Although how good that is in this game remains to be seen. But there's a ton of these early enemies that are weak to ice, so I wanted to make sure you had the potential to have an ice attack early. So I wanted to add this skill here. So here it is. It's basically the same thing as Thunder Strike, except with stats related to ice and dealing ice damage. Thunder Strike's way up here because I made it a while back. See, this is Fire and Wind. It's just your Fire and Wind stats added on. 1 MP, 20 TP, lightning damage, slightly higher crit rate, and chance to paralyze, but slightly lower chance to do normal if your weapon has a condition that applies. This is Sleep, same higher crit rate. It uses your water and wind stats instead of your fire and wind stats because those are the stats that make ice. And 1 MP, 20 TP, all that stuff. But it's very useful to have some additional source of these things. So I've added that. I haven't really done anything with some of these. I still need to test Recharge to see how this is. I don't remember if I talked about it last time or not, but it restores up to a certain amount of MP to an ally and heals them for each point of MP that's restored. So it doesn't do a very good job if your allies are low or are high on MP. Piercing Gleam. I buffed Hydroblast a bit. I think I buffed it a little bit too much, so I'm going to actually lower these a little bit while I'm thinking about it. This was 2 and 3, and that was just too weak. That's really all I gotta say there. Let's see. Icy Breath is pretty good. I'm happy with this spell. So in my playtest, I used the Blizzagus, the Druid, which was super OP, for reasons I can discuss briefly, and which you can see in poignant detail in the VOD from, the 27th of March, 2020? I want to say, to give you an idea of things. I'm recording this on the 30th of March, 2020. So Icy Breath is in a pretty good spot. Healing Hot Spring is very strong. I'm not sure if it's too strong or not. I'll need to play around with it a bit more. But it turns out 12 times your water stat is a lot on this guy. So I don't know if that's too much or not. But this is a very good skill. Exploding Vigor and Second Wind. So Second Wind is reasonable, although it has some issues where losing TP can make it so that way the ally can't use a skill, which can be annoying. and Windborne speed is definitely really strong. I'll need to play with this one more to see where this one's at. What I ended up discovering is Exploding Vigor was very, very, very good. So the original I say, the way that this would worked at the start of the playtest was it made the enemy lose some trivial amount of TP, and then for each point lost did massive damage. So I was getting ludicrous figures off of this. I have adjusted it so that way it requires a lot of TP loss, and then gives you a little bit of damage per point of TP lost. I think this is in a better place. Again, you can watch the playtest to get some more experience with this. But this was real good. I think it's still good. I don't think it's quite as good. Things do start with TP, so you can use this right off the bat as well. It's something important that I discovered. I haven't really touched a lot of these other skills. There is one more skill to talk about, though, which is Interception. So Interception itself, there's not a whole lot to say about it specifically, but it's rather the state that it applies. So I made that state absorb all damage that you would take. Well, all is a bit strong. 999,999. So basically all of the damage that you would take. That proved to be stupid because I got into a state in the playtest, this is why playtesting is useful, where I basically made my team invulnerable. I had a character that was using this, and then other characters could just attack enemies with impunity because they were in the red, and I could just keep them in the red, and a character could just spam this every turn. The Blazagus I had with this could just spam this literally every turn, and all damage that would be dealt to my party was instead turned to healing for the Blazagus, and the other characters could just Exploding Vigor things with impunity, and it was ridiculous. So I needed to fix that, and I did. Part of that was toning down Exploding Vigor. Part of that was making so that way Intercepting caps the amount of healing it can do at 10 times your strength stat, which is still really strong. Like, it still allows you to absorb a lot. If you have 25 strength, you can absorb 250 damage hits, right? Or up to 250 damage. But above that, it begins to take down from the healing. So, I don't know, those crits for like 700 damage that the enemies will do will punch right through that if you're trying to do things. Basically, I want this to be good, but I don't want this to allow you to get into an abusive state where all of your party's at low health and they just hang out there, so that way your one person with Intercepting can just sit there and just tank all of the damage indefinitely with no repercussions. I don't want that happening. I'm still going to need to keep an eye on the skill to see if I need to tone down this figure even further, but that was a bit ridiculous. So, yeah. I think that's a lot of the skill stuff that's happened. Have I added any items? I don't think so. Not that I haven't gone over already. Anyway, and I've added these oozes that I think I've already talked about. I think I've already talked about all that stuff. I think I did some ooze stuff. Let's just wander around some of these towns a little bit, just to show some of the, I don't know, crafting NPC or something. This was the group that I was taking around. That was them fighting a chimera. So if I go over here and go visit this guy here, he asked me about being interested in stuff and then offers to make me these things. And these you'll notice right here in the cost, they require the relevant fruits. So if I want to make an applewood club, I need apples. So on and so forth. This isn't hard to acquire. You can just go interact with the farmer's market. They sell all these fruits. Like, these fruits are widely available. But I like having them as an additional thing. And then these require less wood. So these require 8 wood. These require 4 wood, but they require more fruit. But this focus has a specific use. So, like, the applewood focus greatly boosts your earth affinity. Water, so on and so forth. We already covered these. But this is why I want to change this from being an applewood focus to just being something else, because you're going to craft them here, and I don't need that as random loot then. I do want to probably make one of these for Hannah to use over the walking stick, because I think it's better. Like, look at that. It gives me a little bit more earth. And gives her the ability to smack things. And use this applewood focus, too. I'm not sure which one would be most useful for... Who's the other one who is using one? Wompoing. He would actually probably want the fire one the most. Yeah. Wind is also useful for him because that boosts your starting TP. Fire, though. Like, this Oak-Carved Focus boosts all of your elemental stats a little bit. I don't know if he would be better off with, like, a big boost to fire, or wind or something. If I really want to emphasize stuff, actually boosting his wind stats probably a good idea. So that's, like, getting a bunch of... Let's just make it morning. I saw somebody asking about this mechanic, by the way. I want it that way if you know what time things are, you can get to it relatively conveniently. But if you don't know, then it's a little bit more... Whatever, I'm just going to buy some cherries. Basically, I don't want... Because, like, the other way to control the time is just walk back and forth a lot. I don't want players to, like, have to walk circles around towns. Like, I have bred Pokemon. I know what it's like to make eggs hatch. Like, I don't need to voice that on players if I don't need to. Oh, I do need more wood as well. Okay, well, whatever. That can be acquired easily. I'm not going to do too much here, but... yeah, I'm trying to figure out, like, balancing stuff between, like, trying to finish off Kendra. I say finish off. Like, there's a lot of stuff to finish off here. Let's use sell wood. Yeah, okay. And fleshing more stuff out there and working on other areas and all that stuff. I mean, it all needs to get done at some point, but the advantage of working on Kendra is that's more immediately visible in playtests. Hey, what do you know? If you walk in from there, you come in a different spot. Good job, self. If you've not seen that sort of thing before, by the way, I should talk about that a little bit. Cherrywood Club and Cherrywood Focus. Thank you. So, yeah, that's a way more impressive looking on him than it was. Give him a little bit of wind. Yeah, this lowers everything else by a little bit, but gives him like 10 more wind. That has some advantages to it. I want to make sure I'm giving you enough options of equipment because that's like where the game is interesting or whatever. I should go ahead and rested this in for no particular reason. Yeah, the farmer's market's here right now. Okay, I think that's about what I want to cover. Just to quickly go over that directional thing that I was talking about, because I do think that's relevant to discuss. If we look at right here, just entering this side will put you in. So there's a couple of different ways of kind of approaching this. With Sycamore, there's two entrances. There's this left entrance and there's this southern entrance. And I know I just used left and south instead of west, but I don't know. I don't immediately... Like, I have to think for a fraction of a second about west and east. So for something like this, it's just a matter of you step on this one, it puts you there. You step on this one, it puts you in that spot. But for other places, like, say... And I kind of need to give this place... I should say, give that place an eastern exit, because not being able to exit out that way is really annoying. That's the forest hut right here. Like right now, you can only go in there. I should clear out some trees and a path so you can come out this way. But that's to finish up my thinking. Right here, for example, This will position you at different spots depending upon which way the player is facing when they step on this tile. So if the player is facing to the right, so they're looking, this is looking opposite, this way, right? Yes, because I'm pointing to my left, which is your right. If they're facing that way, then they get placed in one spot. If they're facing that way, they're placed in another spot. If they're facing up, they get placed in another spot. If they're facing down, they get placed in another spot. So if they're facing up, that means they walked up into it. If they're facing down, they walked down into it. If they're facing right, they walked right into it. If they're facing left, they walked left into it. And so each of these has different spots where it will place you. So for example, if you are facing to the right, this is that first one, it will place you here because that's the direction you're facing. If you're facing down, you will be placed here. If you're facing up, you'll get placed here, I think. And if you're facing left, you'll get placed over here. So that's a technique that you can use to make it so that way when you step on a tile, you enter in a slightly different spot. And to give it so that way, it has a bit of a broader feel that way. Some other things, for example, right here, with Isle Watch, if you come, from those directions, you can see that these do the same sort of thing, where, like, say if you're facing up when you walk in here, you'll be put in here, or over here or up here, right? Depending upon which direction you were facing when you entered this place. However, if you were facing left, that meant you came from the sea, which meant you disembarked from your boat to step onto this tile. And so when you do that, it would strand your boat over here. So what ends up happening is I warp you to the dock, and I also set the position of the boat to be at the end of the dock. So that's a setup that I've used to do some of that sort of stuff. So I'm probably going to do similar things over here, where if you enter from the top or the side over here, it puts your boat in a specific spot. So those are just some ways of managing that sort of thing. If you've not seen that sort of thing before, not thought about it, that allows for a little bit of variety. And like some places, this always gives you in the same spot, whatever, and things like that. But it can be useful for certain areas if you want to allow the player to kind of like come into it from different angles and stuff like that. And I don't do that everywhere. Like I don't do that at Caledon and things like that. Okay. Well, if there's any questions, you can go ahead and leave them below, or you can check out the next playtest live stream. Or there's also a link to my Discord down below. I have a Discord server. You can always ask questions there too. I have a specific channel for Astral Collision, if I remember correctly. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. It's been a long one. Lots of stuff to cover. Lots of high-level thinking stuff to cover as well, which takes quite a bit of time to kind of go over. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care, everyone, and goodbye.